Okay, so picture this, the most infamously haunted building in all of England. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the legendary ancient Ram Inn. We're going to carefully map out the terrifying myths, the famous modern ghost hunts, and then we'll look at what hard architectural science actually has to say about the building's true history. We've got a ton of fascinating ground to cover, so let's get right into it.
To really grasp the stakes of this place, you've got to listen to the people who actually live there. Take this incredibly chilling quote from John Humphreys, the past owner of the property. He claimed that on his very first night in the house, an unseen demonic force grabbed his arm and literally dragged him from his bed across the room. And, until his death, he claimed he was regularly attacked by all sorts of entities residing within the home. Talk about a rough welcome.
The place he's talking about is the ancient Ram Inn, tucked away in the market town of Wootton-under-Edge in Gloucestershire. Visually, it is a striking Grade 2R listed building, which just means it's a heavily protected historic site, complete with dark, twisting corridors and an atmosphere that visitors constantly describe as, well, just oppressive. Today we're going to impartially examine the dense, chilling folklore that's transformed this former pub into the absolute holy grail for paranormal enthusiasts all over the world.
Okay, let's dive into this. Because to understand the fear, we really have to start with the foundational lore. According to the legend that's been passed down for decades, the ancient Ram Inn is over 800 years old, supposedly built way back in 1145. The story goes that it was originally used by local priests to house slaves and workers who were constructing the nearby St. Mary's Church. But, as you might guess, the lore goes way deeper and much, much darker than that. The property is said to sit directly on top of a 5,000-year-old pagan burial ground. And if that wasn't enough, it supposedly rests right on the intersection of two ley lines. Think of those as spiritual energy highways that you can trace on a map straight through the center of Stonehenge. Believers say this ancient, surging energy literally feeds the paranormal power trapped inside the inn. And it seems like all of that dark energy pools in a few very specific areas of the house. Up on the first floor, you'll find what's widely considered the most terrifying spot in the entire inn, the bishop's room. Back when the building operated as a bed and breakfast, guests would routinely flat out refuse to sleep in here. And those who did try, they often ended up fleeing the property in the middle of the night. Visitors have reported seeing a tall shadow figure, the ghost of a monk, and, get this, an apparition of a centurion on horseback that was once seen walking straight through a solid wall. Even more terrifying, guests report feeling this sudden, extreme pressure on their chests as they try to sleep, and there are numerous accounts of a succubus creeping into beds with sleeping visitors. Absolutely wild stuff.
Then, just down the hall, we have the witch's room. Local legend states that back in the 1500s, a woman accused of being a high priestess and practicing witchcraft actually hid in this exact room before she was captured and burned at the stake. Today, visitors claim her spirit remains trapped right there. People entering the space often report being overcome with an overwhelming sense of dread, deep sadness, and sometimes even a sudden, totally inexplicable feeling of hatred. Paranormal enthusiasts even claim they regularly capture her spirit in photographs, just staring out the window of the room.
Now, these claims of paranormal activity aren't just limited to bad vibes and feelings of dread. They get incredibly physical. Up in the attic, visitors report encountering a demonic entity with glowing red eyes, accompanied by some serious poltergeist activity, where guests have literally been pushed, choked, and heavily scratched. But perhaps the darkest claim of all comes from the ground floor. Remember the former owner, John Humphreys? Well, he claimed to have discovered an ancient grave hidden beneath the floorboards right under the staircase. Inside, he reported finding what he believed to be the skeletal remains of children right alongside broken daggers. As you can imagine, discoveries like that absolutely fueled rumors of ancient ritual sacrifices happening on the property. So, with a reputation this intense, it was really only a matter of time before the modern titans of paranormal investigation showed up, right? The inn gained massive international exposure when Zach Baggins, Nick Groff, and Aaron Goodwin chose the Ancient Ram Inn for their Season 2 finale lockdown of Ghost Adventures. The crew fully immersed themselves in the malevolent atmosphere of the building, but what exactly did they manage to capture on tape? And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer volume of paranormal evidence they documented during that single night. It was pretty staggering. They captured some seriously chilling EVPs, electronic voice phenomena. In the bishop's room, a disembodied voice said, "Leave now." Over in the witch's room, an EVP whispered, "Burned." And up in the attic, their spirit box actually growled the word evil. They also documented physical harm. Nick felt an invisible force physically pull his arm, and Zach discovered 3 deep scratch marks right on his neck. They tracked EMF spikes hitting 4.5 on the detector, and visually, their cameras picked up a solid black mass in the bishop's room and a faint, glowing figure on a thermal camera in the witch's room. By the end of it, the crew concluded it was easily one of the most sinister places they had ever investigated.
So, we've got this incredibly dense 800-year-old mythology, fully backed by some genuinely compelling modern television evidence. It makes for a fantastic campfire ghost story, doesn't it? But what happens when we pivot away from the ghost hunters for a second? What happens when we look at this structure through the completely objective, totally impartial lens of hard architectural science? Does that 1145 origin story actually hold up?
To answer that, we have to talk about a scientific method known as dendrochronology. Basically, this is the incredibly precise process of dating tree rings to the exact year they were formed. When architectural historians examine the wooden beams used to build historic structures, they can use this method to determine the precise year the timber was felled. It is an incredibly accurate, bulletproof way to date a building.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that the ancient Ram Inn has actually undergone this exact scientific testing. We can look directly at the Vernacular Architecture Group's Index of Tree Ring Dated Buildings in England, specifically the Gloucestershire County list. What we're looking at here is a completely impartial, purely scientific record of historical construction dates. No myths, just facts.
And if we zoom in on the specific entry for our location, the data gives us a definitive answer. The entry clearly reads, Wotton Under Edge, the Ancient Ram Inn, parlor, hall, and service bays, and the felling date range for the timber used to construct this supposedly 800-year-old building, 1495 and 1496. Let that sink in. It wasn't built in 1145 to house slaves for St. Mary's Church. It was actually constructed in the late 15th century as a late medieval parlor and hall. The math completely changes.
When we place the legend and the architecture side by side like this, the contrast is just stark. On one hand, you have this foundational myth that the inn is an 800-year-old structure steeped in centuries of deep, dark history attached to that specific ancient timeline. But on the other hand, you have undeniable, scientifically proven tree ring data showing the wood was felled in 1495. Now, we aren't here to tell you what to believe about the ghosts or the paranormal activity, but the science absolutely, definitively rewrites the historical origins of the building itself.
But here's the crazy part. Does this scientific revelation dampen the lore? Not even a little bit. In fact, the busyness of the haunting has only grown. The current owner, Caroline Humphreys, whose father John bought the property back in 1968 and converted it into a guest house, noted that over time, the building simply evolved into an event location specifically tailored for paranormal activity. The legend didn't die, it actually became the location's defining feature.
So the crucial point is that regardless of the hard science dating the building to 1495, the ancient Ram Inn absolutely thrives today precisely because of its supernatural reputation. It turns out, ghosts are fantastic for business. The inn operates on a highly structured, monetized schedule. For £10, you can swing by for an open-day visit. You can book an afternoon ghost hunt. You can even bring your kids to a junior ghost hunt. Or if you're feeling exceptionally brave, you can lock yourself inside from 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. for a full overnight ghost hunt, complete with group vigils, seances, and all the paranormal equipment provided for you.
Which really leaves us with this fascinating paradox to consider as we wrap up. The architecture proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that the building isn't from 1145. Yet, thousands of visitors and professional ghost hunters continue to capture audio, video, and physical evidence of something truly unexplained happening within those walls. So I'll leave you with this final provocative thought. If the 800-year-old origin story is just a myth, what exactly is haunting the 1495 wood of the ancient Ram Inn? Is it trapped energy, or just our own powerful human desire to be scared? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope this helped you map out the fact and the fiction of England's most infamous house. Keep questioning and keep learning.